Not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
So recently there is a lot of new controversy about assassination of Kennedy in the news since the Trump administration released new documents. So I decided to ask someone who wasn't there, but was there at the time when it actually happened, because you know, it's really insightful to get someone with opinions who lived through all the different political eras here.
My name is Warren Babiar, and I live in Hollywood, California, and I'm retired.
So what's your take on the whole assassination of that?
Well, it's one of those events that you never forget, and you never forget where you were at the time it happened. And this is 1963, November, and I was working for a company in El Segundo, California, International Data Cards, and we manufactured the tab cards for the early computers.
So like you were like the first startups in California?
Exactly.
Oh, nice, nice.
And I was delivering a box of cards to a customer, and I was on Hawthorne Boulevard. I was driving my Carmen Ghia, Volkswagen Carmen Ghia, and I had the radio on, and there was a news flash, and it said that President Kennedy was shot in Dallas. And I made a U-turn, returned to the office, and notified everyone in the office that there was a shooting in Dallas. The president was shot. Immediately, everyone stopped work. They pulled out their transistor radios in those days. Everyone had transistor radios. And the secretary started crying, and it was no work for the rest of the day. Let me give you a little background prior to the assassination of where Kennedy came into the picture as president. He was elected president in 1960. He ran against Richard Nixon, who was vice president for 8 years under General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. And Richard Nixon was well known throughout the world. He was a man that was familiar with world leaders and particularly the Russians. Khrushchev knew Nixon quite well, respected Nixon, and it was somebody that he felt comfortable with had he become president. After Eisenhower was in office for 8 years, the country needed a change. The young people thought that the old general did his job. We had 8 years of peace. We built up the military, but the young people thought times were changing and the old rulers had to be replaced by someone young. And President Kennedy at the time was the youngest president ever elected. Kennedy was not tested by the Russians. They didn't know Kennedy. They had no idea of who this young senator was. They knew Nixon, and they would have never tried this Cuban Missile situation with Nixon, because they were aware that Nixon was vice president for 8 years under General Eisenhower, and General Eisenhower was a tough bird. He was commander of all the Allied forces during World War II. So they knew Nixon. They didn't know Kennedy. So to test Kennedy, they decided to move missiles into Cuba, which didn't work out. Khrushchev turned the ships around with the missiles, and that was the end of that. So Kennedy, coming from a wealthy family, well-educated, good-looking, a wonderful family. His wife was very attractive. It was like Camelot, what they call Camelot, an era of good feeling in the country now. Everything is changing. The music, became rock and roll. So Kennedy won, but by a very slim margin. Very slim. It was probably less than 1 percentage point of the popular vote. So that was in 1960. Now, Kennedy nominated his brother Robert Kennedy to become Attorney General. Robert Kennedy started to investigate the mafia in this country. And he brought a lot of the mafia leaders to the Capitol. And they were questioned by the Senate. And so Robert Kennedy applied a lot of pressure on the mafia at that point, which was very powerful in this country. And then in 1963, when Kennedy came to Dallas, Texas, we had a situation where we had the Kennedy connection with his brother to the mafia. Then we have a character by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, who was in the military at one point and supposed to be a pretty good shot.
Anybody know who Lee Harvey Oswald was? Private Snowball.
Sir, he shot Kennedy, sir!
That's right. And do you know how far away he was?
Sir, it was pretty far.
He was 250 feet away and shooting at a moving target. Oswald got off 3 rounds with an old Italian bolt-action rifle in only 6 seconds and scored 2 hits, including a headshot. Do any of you people know where these individuals learned how to shoot? Private Joker.
Sir, in the Marines, sir!
In the Marines, outstanding.
And he met with the Russians in Mexico City at the Russian embassy. And he also flew to Moscow and I think lived there. He married a Russian woman. And so we have that character. Then we have another character by the name of Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was a nightclub owner in New Orleans who had connections with the mafia. So now let's come to November '63, Dallas, Texas. Kennedy was received by a warm welcome. It was a sunny day. He didn't want to ride in the bubble top limousine that Eisenhower used when he was president. The bubble top was a bulletproof see-through top that Eisenhower used. He wanted to use an open car. He used the black Lincoln convertible. And in the convertible was Jacqueline Kennedy, his wife, John Connally, the senator from Texas, and his wife. They were in the jump seat. And the car proceeded through Dallas. Warm crowds welcome. It was a sunny day. Kennedy, as he drove past the book depository, Dallas Depository, and Oswald was on one of the top floors that had a view of the street as the car passed. Oswald was equipped with a rifle bolt action, single shot rifle with a scope on it. By the way, if this was a conspiracy, he would certainly be equipped with better weapons than this bolt action rifle.
You can get access in America to much better things.
Right. If it was a mafia or if it was, you know, a Russian conspiracy, they would have equipped him with Thompson submachine guns, or I don't know if AK-47 was out at the time, but they would have equipped him with certainly better guns. But he shot Kennedy with this rifle while the car was driving down the street past some trees that partially obstructed the view. Now, the shot hit Kennedy in the back of the head, blowing the back of his head off. Oswald hid the gun in the book depository and disappeared. He was arrested, he was taken to jail, and then I think the following day he was transported from his cell down a hallway that was filled with reporters. It was crammed with FBI, local police, and in the crowd was Jack Ruby, this nightclub owner from New Orleans that had the connections with the mafia. Now, Jack Ruby knew the newspaper people, the local police, and he just happened to have a gun with him. Security in those days isn't what it is today. And he stepped out in front of Oswald and shot him to death at that point. Ruby was taken to jail, and before he was tried, Ruby died of cancer. So we have Kennedy assassinated by Oswald. Oswald is now dead. Ruby is dead. So now that the current president, Trump, has agreed to release most of the papers that were secret and being held. But I think part of them is still being withheld. So now everybody is into this conspiracy now. Did the mafia order it? Did the Russians order it? So there's all kinds of conspiracy theories, but still, nobody knows.
Пишите в комментариях свои вопросы, особенно если у вас есть вопросы к Ворону. Подписывайтесь на канал, чтобы не пропустить следующее видео, которое будет о самом большом пожаре в истории Лос-Анджелеса. Давайте, увидимся!